The 146th United States Open is scheduled to begin on August 30th, 2026 at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Flushing Meadows, Queens. It will be the last Grand Slam of the year, the one that occupies American primetime after Wimbledon has gone quiet. The draw is set to open on a site the public treats like a park that happens to host tennis. In June 2026, 2 months before first serve, the nonprofit USTA National Tennis Center issued $600 million in senior notes. The proceeds are intended to help pay for an $800 million luxury renovation of Arthur Ashe Stadium and the wider tennis center. The paper went to Wall Street. The borrower is not a hotel chain. It is the entity behind a venue whose signature product lasts about 2 weeks. That is the paradox the cameras will not explain. A seasonal bowl in a city park, used in anger for a fortnight, raised institutional debt on the scale of a civic megaproject. The notes are real. The rating process was real. The renovation is framed as comfort and prestige. The financing is framed as fuel for American tennis beyond the baseline.
Most viewers will arrive, if they arrive, for the bounce and the noise. They will not be shown the indenture. They will not be asked to consider what a senior note holder is entitled to when September comes and the grounds go still. The contradiction is not popularity. New York can fill a stadium. The contradiction is duration. How does 2 weeks of sport become $600 million of borrowed money? What gets pledged when the lights shut off? Arthur Ashe Stadium has always looked like a cathedral of a final. Look again. It is also a box of contracted inventory. Suites, club seats, camera positions, and rain-proof hours that a network can sell in advance. The June issuance makes that architecture impossible to ignore. Before the 2026 tournament is scheduled to start, the physical plant is already answering to a balance sheet. 14 days of play, hundreds of millions in long-term debt, a luxury rebuild. The Open will be sold as sport. The stadium is being rebuilt as collateral.
For most of the 20th century, the American Championships belonged to a club. The first official national tournament in 1881 was held at the Newport Casino in Rhode Island, a social stage as much as a court. In 1915, the event moved to the West Side Tennis Club in Forest Hills, Queens. Grass, then clay, then a stadium that still felt like a membership. White clothes, box hedges, a social order that treated the draw as an extension of the locker room. Even after the Open era began in 1968 and amateurs and professionals were allowed to share the same trophy, the setting remained a private world the public was permitted to visit. In 1978, the tournament leaves. It does not drift. It is moved, on purpose, into Flushing Meadows Corona Park, onto ground still marked by the World's Fair, into a converted bowl that will be called Louis Armstrong Stadium. The Singer Bowl, a fair relic, is recut for tennis. The geography is a decision. The site sits by the number 7 train, by the Grand Central Parkway, under the flight path of LaGuardia. Jets interrupt tosses. The night is hot. The crowd is louder than Forest Hills ever allowed itself to be.
The United States Tennis Association is not looking for quiet. It is looking for scale. What most people miss is that the move is not a change of address. It is a change of what can be sold. A country club cannot be packaged like a municipal destination. A park edge complex with highway ramps, a subway portal, and a skyline in the background can be pitched to networks as a city, not a lawn party. The sport that arrives in Flushing is still tennis. The product that leaves Forest Hills is something else, a 2-week occupation of New York. Wimbledon remains, to this day, a private club that rents its miracle to the world for a fortnight and then returns to hedges. Roland Garros is a federation fortress in a city of clay. Melbourne rebuilt its park into a hardcourt machine. The American path is cruder and more commercial. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the Flushing grounds thicken. Temporary courts become permanent. Food halls multiply. Sponsors stop whispering and start rapping the walls. Night sessions turn a baseline rally into American primetime inventory. Connors, Everett, McEnroe, then Sampras and Agassi do not merely win titles. They teach the association that a late match in Queens can behave like a broadcast studio with a crowd. In 1997, Arthur Ashe Stadium opens as the new center court,
a concrete horseshoe large enough to make a tennis match look like a convention. More than 23,000 seats. The largest tennis stadium on Earth. It is named for a champion who forced the country to see the game as more than a club. It is also, from the first rendering, a stack of premium elevations. The cheap seats go up. The money goes sideways, into boxes that can be leased as rooms. In 2006, the campus takes the name of Billie Jean King, another figure who broke the old social contract. The naming is tribute. It is also a flag. A national tennis center that carries her name can claim a public mission while selling a private experience in the upper decks. The city park around it remains City Park. The 2 weeks inside the gates become a gated economy. A grounds pass still feels democratic. The vertical section of the bowl does not. By the 2010s, the last serious weather risk is treated as a business problem.
A retractable roof rises over the main stadium so that a rain delay cannot steal a night session from a broadcaster. The lid is sold to fans as comfort. The people who sign the contracts remember it as delivery. A match that can be promised at 7 p.m. Eastern is worth more than a match that might wander into Thursday. Architecture answers to a clock, not to a cloud. This is the historical blind spot. Casual viewers think the Open grew because America loves tennis. The noise is real. The deeper shift is institutional. Once the championship left the club, it had to become a destination that could be scheduled, insured, packaged, and renewed. Flushing Meadows gave the USTA a physical plant that could be improved, expanded, and later described to a credit committee in the language of cash flow. The 1978 decision did not merely modernize a tournament, it created an asset that could walk into a capital market and be understood. The contradiction sits in the soil of Queens. A game that once depended on membership now depends on a site that must justify itself every August by behaving like infrastructure.
Follow the institution, not a single celebrity executive. The USTA is the national governing body for tennis in the United States. It is a nonprofit. It runs junior pathways, adult leagues, and the usable myth that a kid on a public court can climb toward the last Sunday in New York. It also runs the fortnight that pays for the myth. The incentive is survival through concentration. Most of the year, tennis in America is fragmented. Cracked park courts, high school teams, fading clubs, a professional tour that often plays in sheds. For 14 days, the association controls a scarce American major in the media capital of the country, with a bowl that can be sold as luxury inventory. If that spike fails, the grassroots story loses its engine. If the spike must never fail, the spike must be made to look like an annuity. In 2026, Fitch Ratings assigns the USTA National Tennis Center Series 2026 senior notes an A- grade with a stable outlook. An A- is not atmosphere. It is a sentence written for insurers and asset managers. This paper is investment grade. The name on the notes is the National Tennis Center, the campus entity.
It is not a fantasy corporation called the US Open Incorporated. That distinction is the whole legal fact. The tournament is the cash register. The center is the borrower. The association is the system that needs both. Why would a Raider treat a seasonal carnival as enough? Because the buyer of the notes is not underwriting one noisy final. The buyer is underwriting contracts that outlive any champion. A long-term broadcast agreement, the ESPN arrangement publicly described on the order of $2 billion, turns August into a receivable. Corporate hospitality does the same at ground level. A suite is not a seat. It is a multi-year relationship with a bank, a watchmaker, an automaker, a law firm that needs to look generous in Manhattan. The check can be invoiced before a ball is tossed. The people inside the USTA are not cartoon villains. They are operators of a monopoly weekend who have learned that mission language and debt language can share a press release. Community tennis is expensive and slow. A luxury renovation is visible and rateable. The hidden motive is not contempt for public courts. It is fear of an ordinary August.
A governing body that lives on one pulse of revenue will do almost anything to make that pulse look predictable. Bondholders have a colder psychology. They want coverage, not backhands. They want to know that if a star withdraws, the rights fees and the suite licenses still arrive. Their obsession is continuity. The open must happen. The roof must close. The hospitality product must remain scarce enough to renew. That is why a nonprofit can enter the same market as an airport authority. The city waits off stage. Flushing Meadows Corona Park is New York land. The public is told it is hosting a championship. The credit file treats the championship as a pledged plant. Between those two descriptions sit every board vote, every hospitality brochure, and every decision that will shape who the rebuilt stadium is actually for.
The decisive turn is not a backhand. It is a design choice that keeps repeating until it becomes fate. When the main stadium is conceived in the 1990s, the USTA does not ask only how many people can watch a final. It asks how many rooms can be sold above the court. Sightlines are split by class. The lower bowl can still feel like sport. The club levels are offices with glass. A corporation does not buy a view of a tennis ball. It buys a locked New York night, a caterer, a logo wall, and the right to tell clients they were inside. That inventory, once built, must be kept scarce. Scarcity is what a banker recognizes. Then the roof arrives, and weather stops being romance. Rain at Forest Hills was atmosphere. Rain under a television contract is breach risk. Close the lid and a night session becomes a deliverable. Open it and the same session becomes a maybe. Networks do not pay $2 billion scale rights for maybes. The structure of the building is rewritten so that a producer in Bristol or a rights lawyer in Manhattan can print a start time and keep it. Fans will remember the shade. The indenture, in spirit if not in a single clause, remembers the clock.
Watch the money separate from the myth. Ticket holders still line up for a grounds pass and a slice. That layer is real, and it photographs well. It is not what makes senior notes possible. What makes them possible is a stack of promises that do not care who wins. Broadcast rights are paid on a calendar. Suites are licensed on a term. Sponsorships are booked against a logo package that exists whether the 10th seed or the first holds the trophy. A credit analyst can model those lines without watching a point. That is the mechanism hiding under the bounce. Now the 2026 choice. The association does not announce a modest patch program for cracked outer courts and call it a day. It announces an $800 million upgrade aimed at luxury and at the main stadium's earning power. The Series 2026 notes, 600 million of them, become the bridge. Intention and outcome split here. The press language will speak of fan experience, of national development, of a campus worthy of a grand slam. The use of proceeds speaks of a building that must throw off more high-margin nights so that a coverage ratio stays polite. Present tense. June. The notes are sold. The outlook is stable.
Committees that will never sit in a box seat, except that a 2-week monopoly in New York, wrapped in multi-year media and hospitality paper, behaves like a small, essential utility. They are not crazy. There are only 4 majors. Only one of them occupies American September television. Only one of them can put a bank's clients on a terrace above a hard court while the rest of the city is still at work. Scarcity plus contract plus a roof is a story a rater can grade. Barriers break in sequence. First, the club is abandoned, so the event can grow. Then the bowl is oversized, so premium inventory can be stacked. Then the sky is closed, so television can be promised. Then the rights concentrate in one dominant network, so the receivable is simple. Then the campus borrows like an authority, so the next renovation does not have to wait for a gentle year of ticket sales. Each step is defensible. Together, they create a machine that cannot shrink without threatening the grade. The wound opens along the mission. The USTA tells the country it needs this engine to fund tennis in parks, schools, and forgotten rec centers. That claim can be sincere and still be a trap. Once grassroots programs are hung on a luxury spike, the luxury spike must be protected. Protecting it means more suites, better clubs, tighter control of the fortnight, higher hospitality prices, and a stadium that looks less like a municipal court and more like a private terminal. The kid on the public court becomes the moral reason for a product the kid will never enter. Risk hides in the same elegance. Concentrate revenue in 2 weeks, and you concentrate failure there too. A labor fight, a city permit war, a long outage, a collapse in corporate entertaining, a network that wants a cheaper deal when the term ends. Any of those can rattle a structure built on continuity. Investment grade is not immortality. It is a weather report. The association answers that weather by making the physical plant more expensive to disappoint. Steel and glass become a promise to people who do not attend. Players feel the distortion without sitting on the board. The schedule bends toward television windows. Night sessions become the product, not the exception. The court is a stage whose lighting, roof, and camera wells were argued in production meetings.
Prize money can rise in public and still be a smaller political fact than debt service and suite renewal. The athletes are the reason the cameras exist. They are not the collateral. New York feels another distortion. A park that hosts a World's Fair memory and a Mets season also hosts, for a blink, one of the most lucrative sports occupations on the planet. Neighbors get traffic and overtime. The city gets a postcard. The borrower gets a plant it can improve as if the park were a campus. None of that requires a conspiracy. It requires a lease, a nonprofit shield, and a fortnight valuable enough to securitize in all but name. And then the loop tightens. Better luxury raises hospitality revenue. Hospitality revenue comforts the rating. A comfortable rating cheapens the next dollar of debt. Cheap debt funds the next luxury. The stadium stops being a place that happens to make money in August. It becomes a device for keeping August sacred. Idealism named the building for Ashe and the grounds for King. Reality names the decks for whoever can sign a multi-year hospitality contract before the first qualifier walks on court. Do not resolve it neatly. The Open can still be thrilling. The debt can still be serviced. Both can be true while the public meaning of the place thins. A nonprofit can tell the truth about needing a revenue engine and still build an engine that dictates the nonprofit. The turning point is not a scandal in a filing. The turning point is the moment a tennis stadium is designed and then redesigned as if its highest purpose were to never surprise a bondholder. By the time the 2026 championship is scheduled to open, the argument is no longer whether tennis belongs in Queens. The argument is what kind of object a Grand Slam has become. Not a club, not quite a public work, something closer to a toll gate built over attention. For 2 weeks a year, a scarce American ritual can be metered. Who sits in glass? Who sits in the weather? Who buys the right to show the points to a nation? Who gets paid when the points end? That is the principle this place now teaches. Familiar culture, once it is rare enough and loud enough, can be financed like infrastructure. You do not need a conspiracy in a smoke-filled room. You need a calendar monopoly, a city that photographs well, a network willing to write a long check, and a building willing to be altered until the check looks safe. The bounce remains beautiful. The beauty is not what is being underwritten. If the tournament begins as planned at the end of August, look at the ramps, not the trophies. Look at the club lounges punched into the bowl, the camera wells that never move, the roof that exists to keep a start time honest, the hospitality kitchens that must feed people who are not there for a second serve. Those choices are not decorations. They are the balance sheets standing up in steel. The physical plant has been taught to protect a grade. There is a human residue that does not fit a coverage ratio. Coaches in public parks will still string rackets with the leftover hope that this circus funds their nets. Night shift cooks will still feed a corporate box that costs more than a junior program. A qualifier will still walk through a loading dock into a cathedral named for a man who played through a country's refusal. None of them appears on the cover of a rating report. All of them live inside the decision to treat a fortnight as if it were a utility. The aftertaste is not collapse. It is capture by success. A sport that once hid behind hedges learned to shout. Shouting paid. Payment invited debt. Debt demanded that the shouting never become uncertain. So the stadium is rebuilt to remove uncertainty, and the mission that justified the debt becomes another line that must be served. Intention can stay noble. Outcome still rearranges the concrete. On a quiet Tuesday in October, if the scheduled Open has come and gone, the grounds will empty the way they always empty. The notes will not empty with them. They will keep a claim on the next August and the one after that, until the luxury that was borrowed for has to be justified again.
When a public feeling game is financed like a toll road, who is the stadium for?